Firstly, if you pause what I said earlier, that there are now more applications that are running on virtualized infrastructure than physical infrastructure. One of the implications is that there are now more copies of traditional operating systems being deployed that no longer see the hardware than those that do. In other words, this task of mediating access to and coordinating hardware is largely being taken over by a new layer of software, something that you very well know, that we call extended virtualization. And that extended virtualization layer now is not only mediating access to the compute resources, to CPU and to memory, but will increasingly mediate access to other resources in the data center, to storage, to networking. And this layer we can think of as the new infrastructure. And it's this layer that is increasingly the focus for innovation in our industry. This is true not just of VMware, it's true of the industry. So when we look at what's going forward, let's try and figure out what are the important needs that we're trying to meet with this innovation. One of the needs that we're trying to meet is to reach beyond pure hardware efficiency and increasingly speak to operational efficiency. Because we know, depending on whose numbers you want to believe, that for every dollar that's spent on hardware in the data center, approximately $6 to $8 is spent on operating that hardware. So we want to take our customers on a journey where they can become more efficient, more resilient, more agile. We have collectively to speak to operational efficiency. And that means that we need to innovate in this layer primarily around automation and management. We need to make it cheaper to operate this new infrastructure. And that automation and management, as I said earlier, has to span all of the resources in the data center. So we see the industry, including ourselves, focusing now on these twin challenges of data center automation and data center management. Another key need is enhanced security. We need to make sure that this new infrastructure not only delivers equivalent security, but actually goes beyond traditional physical infrastructure and addresses the needs of security going forward. Traditionally, security has been done by associating checks at physical boundaries. We're in a world where we're now blurring physical boundaries. So many of the security functions now have to be associated with the logical boundaries in the data center. And we are now starting on that journey to deliver an integrated security model for this layer that speaks to logical boundaries rather than physical boundaries. So these are themes of innovation that's happening by virtue of what's changing in this new infrastructure layer. Another key change here is how this infrastructure will be consumed and paid for. When you look at the way this increased automation, management, and security will be manifest inside the data center, we like to use this phrase, the private cloud. The private cloud, in some sense, is basically shorthand for the collective effect of these three streams of innovation. And we think that the private cloud not only needs increased automation, management, security, but it needs new constructs by which to interact with your infrastructure. And one of those key constructs is this notion of a virtual data center. A virtual data center is really a collection of applications or services that share some common set of policies. So increasingly, we're about allowing you to think about your world in terms of associating services and applications with policies that will then inform the automation, the management, and the security. This is also a very important construct because it's this construct that will really unlock new ways to purchase and utilize infrastructure. So another stream of innovation here comes around this notion of how infrastructure will be purchased. On whose books will the capital expense sit? And can you purchase infrastructure in a just-in-time fashion? It's a very seductive promise that to make this a reality, it means that we as an industry have to work together, not only those of us who work in the sphere of the private cloud, but we have to work in close partnership with an ecosystem of service providers. Because this reality of being able to take existing applications and move them, driven by business needs, into external infrastructure will only happen if we get the right standards and standardization in place. So we as an industry need to make sure that there's not only compatible infrastructure on both sides of the equation, but there's compatible management. Because if the way that you relate to and manage your workloads inside your private cloud is going to be radically different from the way that you relate to and work with those applications inside a service provider cloud, then we're going to end up actually costing customers money, not saving the money and offering them new opportunities. And just as it's important to figure out how to get workloads into the cloud, make it easy to take one or more of those virtual data centers and slide it across into a service provider cloud, it's as important to understand that having done that, you can get it back out of the cloud if you want to. And we think that the collection of this innovation, these constructs, the work with the industry is necessary to make this concept of what we call the secure hybrid cloud a reality. And we certainly believe that most businesses will really consume and experience the benefits of cloud-based resources in this framework of a secure hybrid cloud. This is going to happen with or without VMworld. This is the tide coming in. We all need to get aligned with it and make sure that we understand this, adapt our products, adapt our business practices for this world. Now, everything I've been talking about now really has one great advantage. It's all done in the infrastructure level, which means that we can take existing applications without having to change those applications and take them along this journey. We can allow businesses to run those applications more efficiently. We can allow them to run more securely. We can allow businesses to provision the underlying infrastructure more flexibly in terms of business models. But is that enough? Is taking existing applications and putting them on infrastructure really going to deliver the real business values that businesses reach for? And the obvious answer is no. Ultimately, infrastructure is just a means towards an end. Infrastructure is a way of running applications. And increasingly, we're seeing businesses realize that if they're stuck on 20 or 30-year-old batch-oriented code, they are not going to be able to service their customers who have grown up in a world where they expect information on demand, delivered wherever they are to whatever device they're using. But that's going to require a set of changes in the application architecture, and new applications will need to be delivered on top of this new infrastructure. So we see emerging a new set of technologies that will be useful and necessary for delivering these new applications. And there will be a new focus for innovation as well in terms of how applications are built going forward. Increasingly, the applications need to be responsive in real time, scalable to high degrees, able to allow you to react to intelligence coming in from your customers. And we believe that the industry has started to respond to that primarily around these new open programming frameworks. Developers have by and large voted with their feet for productivity reasons. And developers these days program to these third-generation frameworks like Spring, like Ruby on Rails. They are also, interesting enough, using new programming languages been in this industry for 30 years. 10 years ago, I thought the evolution of programming languages had stopped with Java and C#. And all of a sudden, I find people writing applications in Scala, in Python, in other technologies. And all this is symptomatic of needs that they need to meet in this application programming level. So we believe it's important to think about how these new open frameworks will be led on top of the new infrastructure, and to associate with programs written in these frameworks the common services that they will need and the common management tools that they will need. So this is the next focus of innovation. Now, there are two other key trends that are happening in our industry. Before I go into that, let me just make a comment actually here about the changing role of the operating system. I said earlier that the traditional operating system, which traditionally has two functions, one is to orchestrate hardware and the other provide abstracted services to applications, that role is changing. Increasingly, the role of providing hardware coordination is going to the virtualization layer, and increasingly the role of providing abstracted services to applications is going to these new frameworks. And it's another example of why the traditional operating system, while it's not going to disappear, is becoming essentially just one of several components that need to fit into this broader view of the world. Now, I said earlier that there are two other key trends that we in the IT space have to deal with. One is the emergence of other clouds. We at VMware are going to do everything we can to give the technology to you and to our partners to experience the hybrid cloud. However, there are other companies in the world, primarily for consumer reasons, who will be in the infrastructure business. And developers writing this new generation of applications are going to want to know that they can, with less effort rather than more effort, deploy their applications across the broadest variety of infrastructure-level clouds. And this is another reason why we think that these new application programming frameworks are so important, because they will provide the glue or the portability layer that allow you to take an application, run it on either a hybrid cloud environment, such as the one that we're trying to build up, or take that application with less rather than more effort, have that application run on other clouds, particularly those coming out of the consumer world, like Google, for instance. Steve Parrott will come back to this theme in the rest of the keynote. So we've so far talked about innovation at the infrastructure level, innovation at the application level, but unfortunately it doesn't stop there, or fortunately because it makes life interesting. There's more happening. One of the things that we see happening around us is the spread of SaaS-based applications.